Hi everyone, I'm Soros, and this is the ultimate guide to engineers. So I know this guide has been a long time coming. It's actually not because engineers are an especially hard faction to explain. It's more because I was busy with other things. And actually, doing this guide, I realized that engineers are a much easier faction to play than Darklings are, says. However, often, if you're a new player to the game, or if you haven't much experience with this faction in particular, or if it's just not your faction, it's probably because you're doing something wrong, and that can be usually fixed quite easily. I'd say that engineers, contrary to Darklings, who have like a slow learning curve, so this kind of you start very high with Darklings. It's easy to do not too bad with them, but to improve with them takes a lot of time. They're very, I think, deep and complex faction in the end, if you want to play them at the highest level. For engineers, I'd say it's more like you have a learning cliff. You'll be very, very bad with them at the beginning, and once you get them, they often will become your best faction. And the goal of this video is at least to get you up that cliff. So, of this series of video, because there should be some in this one. Alright, so yeah, hopefully it can get you up to that point. There will be many parts of this video, just like for the Darklings video, maybe a little less, but we will start with part 1 of the ultimate guide to engineers. So here's the topic that we will cover, kind of similar to the pattern that we've been following. General considerations, a lot of math in this one, that will be for today. Then the ideal setup, what you're looking for setup as engineers, what are then your best starting spots in key hexes, town spots, where you're going to town up, how you're going to develop for network, what's going to be your ideal building order, how to play on cult with NG, how to use the bridge strategy or how to not use the bridge strategy, which will be rather the case, and the kind of opening that you can do. Okay, so let's get to it. First, so general consideration. NG, I think, are an extremely powerful faction, but many people get them wrong at first. I remember when I first played them, when I discovered the game, I was playing them completely wrong. And that's part of the reason why there's kind of such a cliff when you learn playing this faction. And the reason for that is that the board is actually kind of misleading. When you look at this board for the first time, the thing that pops to your eyes is that engineers have this special ability to build bridges. They are engineers. And it's very big, build bridges. And then you look, okay, cool, what's their other abilities? And you see that they have their stronghold will give them points for building bridges. And so your reflex is, well, engineers are about to build bridges. That's the strategy that engineers should go for. And hell, there's even a bridge drawing on their logo, if there was any doubt about it. So the reflex of most players when you start playing engineers is believing that engineers are about building bridges. And that's wrong. That's totally wrong. If building bridges with engineers is your go-to strategy, you're playing them wrong. That's not what engineers are mainly about. Bridges is just kind of an add-on, some kind of an afterthought. It's just something which is nice, and just a nice way to convert your resource into points when you have too much. But you can play a very, very decent game, like very, very strong game, over 170 points without building any bridges with engineers. Because that's not what engineers are about. What engineers are about are very low building costs. So you have 1 coin discount for the dwellings, you have 1 coin discount for the trading post and 1 worker discount, 1 coin discount for the temple, and 1 worker discount again. So you have a discount building these buildings, and to kind of moderate this advantage, because in itself it will be huge advantage. You have buildings that give you lower income and a lower starting income. So if you look at it, you have no base worker income, no income for your third dwelling and for your fifth dwelling. For the sixth dwelling, sorry. And you have a temple that give you no priest but give you 5 power. That's, at first you may wonder if that's a good thing or not, and the answer is that's a very good thing. For NG, we'll see, especially the power here is really nice. And the starting resources, so starting a little low compared to other faction, but it's actually not that bad at all. The thing is a little more bothering is that you don't have any cult at the beginning. So that's the other special feature of NG at the beginning of the game. They are only faction who have no cult head start in any cult. And we'll talk about whether or not that makes NG less likely to play on the cult track. So there's at least 2 reasons why NG are less likely to play on the cult track. The second temple is not giving them a priest, and they don't start with any income at all of any cult position, I mean. So, well, before though we talk to cult, we'll focus on this important feature of them, the fact that they have this special building cost and special incomes from their buildings, and we'll try to figure out what it means for playing engineers. Alright, since engineers are mainly about cheap buildings and different incomes, that's really what I want to focus next. We'll start with building cost and try to get a more precise idea of how engineers' building costs compares to other faction. So if we start with the dwelling, so you have here how much the dwelling costs and how much a dwelling costs in a vanilla faction. So in the normal faction, say Oren for example, or witches, the dwelling will cost 1 worker 2 coins, but for NG it's 1 worker 1 coin. So that's the same amount of worker but a discount of 50% in coins. Trading post is a much bigger discount. So 1 worker 2 coins compared to 2 worker 3 coins. That's 50% worker cost and 66% of the coins. If you look at the temple, you have again an important discount. That's 50% of the workers and 80% of the coins. Sanctuary, and same as for the stronghold, you have 3 workers, 6 coins for engineers, so that's 75% of worker cost and 100% of the coins cost. And if we look like building all your structures with NG, say that you will build all the 17 structures, it will ask for 34 workers, 61 coins, and the same with normal faction, or faction with the normal cost will be 49 workers and 89 coins. That's 69% of worker and 69% of the coins. That's probably not just happened by chance. It's probably a game design. They probably decided that the cost of their building will be about 70% of other faction. So once we have mapped this out, what does that tell us? Well, it tells us 2 things. The buildings for which you have the biggest discount are the trading post and the temple. That's the buildings that you have like best reduction. And so in itself, it means that you probably should build them much more often as NG than as other faction, because for these buildings you have a much more important cost reduction than others. It's the most efficient buildings for NG. On the other hand, you see that the big buildings, you don't have much of a discount. Same amount of coins and a very high percentage of workers, definitely meaning that the big buildings for NG are not efficient buildings. Usually you want to build them quite late in the game, around 5, 6 if you build them at all. And often you will end up building one of them because you have such a high economy if you build it right, that you'll need to build them in the end because you'll go above 15 structures. But again, it should come quite late in the game, and that's just another reason why the bridge strategy is not the best strategy for NG. It implies building the stronghold for which you don't have good discount. So yeah, that's already part of the explanations. And now let's go back to the NG board and see, okay, right now we know that we have on average a 69% discount on workers and coins for every building, on average. What about the income that you get? And the first thing that pops to my eyes on this board is the trading post. You see, you don't have any penalty on trading post income. It's the exact same in the Vanilla faction, meaning that the engineers trading posts are incredibly efficient building. You want trading posts on the board. Contrary to other factions where trading posts are not especially good, NG trading posts are really great, and you'll want to build a lot more trading posts in the middle game than any other faction, because it's cheap and give you 2 coins income and some power. And then again, I mean, these 2 coins for NG, they're worth probably 3 coins. So it's like if because you can do more with 2 coins, you can do 69, you can do like 30% more than another faction. So these trading posts are extremely efficient. And again, that's another reason why I suppose the stronghold is not great. I mean, when you build a stronghold, you lose the income that you had from the trading post, and the stronghold only gives you 2 power, so you don't get much in terms of income and compared to what you were losing. So it's big. It's really slowing your economy, and the same, and even worse when you consider the building cost. I mean, the stronghold is 3 worker, 6 coins. So suppose you have 1 trading post on the board and you upgrade it to stronghold. It means that you lose the income, but worse than that, with these 3 workers, 6 coins, you could have built the 3 trading posts remaining. I mean, so rather than having this 8 coins and 6 power income, you have just 2 power income. Of course, it's not completely true, because you're also, when you build trading posts, you're also losing workers income, so it's not that dramatic, but it's costing a lot. Okay, this stronghold is costing a lot, and it should be built most of the time only in a very high econ game, where you have a lot of economy and you're trying to convert this economy into points. So, and if we look at the other buildings, again, the temple gives you 5 power. That's good for NG. NG, they can do more with every resources than any other faction, because their building are so cheap. So 5 power for them is better than 5 power for any other faction. And experience shows that usually you'll want this temple very early. And NG won their second temple very early. So temple is cheap, and this 5 power is really good. So that's one of the reasons why you want your second temple very early. The other reason is because of your worker income. So the big penalty, you don't get any penalty for your trading post income. You get a big penalty for dwelling income. And that's also, if you remember, you don't have that much of a discount on dwellings either. Meaning that contrary to other faction, on the other faction I've said a good economy is a dwelling economy. You want to have as many dwelling as you can. It's different for NG. And we'll try to figure out the right ratio in a minute. But NG, you're less worried about building many dwellings, and you often want to have trading posts and temple rather early. Alright, so next I want to consider a little more like the worker income for NG, and to ponder a little about how it compares to other factions. So that will kind of help us to see what we should aim when we are playing NG. And if we do compare these incomes, you have here this little table. So you have here like the vanilla faction, how it would produce workers compared to NG on the top here. And the percentage on this row is the percentage of worker production from NG compared to the vanilla faction. So when you don't have any dwelling here, it's 0 to 1, so it's 0%. And when you have all your dwelling built, it's 6 workers for NG compared to 8 workers for the vanilla faction, so that's 75%. As you see, I've underlined the numbers here. 67% for when you have 2 dwellings and 4 dwellings, and 75% when you have the 8 dwellings. And those are the ones that you should aim to hit all the time. It sometimes says that obviously you want to avoid ending on the empty dwelling, so that's quite obvious, but also an important difference when you get to the 5th and especially the 8th. As you may remember, it's 69%. To build all structures, you need 69% of the workers from the vanilla faction, meaning that when you get at 2 and 4, you're very close to that, and when you get at 6, you're above that. And you also have to remember that although it's 69% generally, that's counting the big buildings, which are almost the same cost in the vanilla faction, which will mean that most of the time you'll need less than 69% to build the other structures. As a rule of thumb, and I'll come back several times during this ultimate guide on this topic, but as a rule of thumb, I'd say that with NG you should aim to keep always 2 dwellings on 2 non-upgraded dwellings on the board. That will be your worker income, and upgrade everything else to temple. So to temple and to trading post. So as a rule of thumb, that's how you should conceive playing the engineers. Always 2 dwellings not upgraded on the board, and then having everything extra you upgrade to temple and to trading posts, because temples and trading posts are your most efficient buildings, and with 2 dwellings on the board you have an interesting income compared to the vanilla faction. Just to complete on that topic, there's just last thing I want to touch is when NG add Earth 1. Because when NG add Earth 1, and they almost always, so that's the thing, right? You upgrade everything to temple. The second temple that you build, the first temple you build is almost always Earth 1. And the second temple that you build is Earth 2. So the reason why you want Earth 1 with NG almost all of the time is that they have such a powerful economy that they can afford Earth 1 and go 15, 16, sometimes 17 structures with Earth 1. So it's not as necessary for them to just pile up economic faction. You want ways to convert this amazing economy into points, and so you take Earth 1. However, since you upgrade everything to temple, with NG you almost always have a second temple by the end of round 2. I mean, almost always. If you're not regularly ending up with a second temple by the end of round 2, you're playing them wrong. So, with the second temple, going for an economic faction, for economic favor tile will be extremely valuable, because you have to remember again, NG get more out of every resources than any other faction, meaning that this worker, and NG especially black worker, we've seen that they have a normal coin income from their buildings. What they don't have, what is not normal about them is their worker income. So NG really lack workers. So the favor tile that you want as an economic favor will almost always be Earth 2, sorry. So because you want the worker income, and you see with the worker income, your incomes become very close to the one of the vanilla faction without Earth 1. So vanilla faction won't often be able to get a second favor tile, which will be economic. So since NG can afford that, and once they do, they have an income for the 3 first dwelling that's exactly the same than the vanilla faction, and then that is relatively close to for the following dwellings to the vanilla faction, meaning that again, staying at 2 dwellings that are not upgraded on the board, plus upgrading everything to temple, will mean that you'll have an economy that is comparable in terms of efficiency to the vanilla faction, but with building that are all half the cost. So that's really the idea that you shall have, and then you'll adapt that to all kind of circumstances. But as kind of general idea, get the idea that you want 2 unupgraded buildings on board, and then upgrade everything to temple and trading post. Alright, so that will be it for this initial part, or this introduction to the Ultimate Guide to Engineers. We've covered the kind of math behind the engineers in this video. And in the next video we'll go, as usual, for the kind of ideal setup that you're looking for with engineers, and the starting spots that they go for. Alright, so thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.